Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, today's Wednesday for me, and I have been trying to get these videos out on Sundays, and it's just been the last month or so has been kind of tough with the holidays that keep coming up on Sundays. Last week was Memorial Day. We have Mother's Day, Easter. So I'm trying to get these on Wednesday nights. So if you get 2 videos within a week, that's because I'm trying to get myself back on track. So we're in John chapter 18 right now. And there's going to be a couple things I want you to keep in mind as I'm reading the verses. I'm going to be reading verses 15 through 27. Now, the first thing is this. There was back in John chapter 13. This is what I want you to realize, and kind of get this in your mind. John chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 were one evening. They were one night where Jesus was having dinner with his disciples. He washed their feet. He taught them other lessons that he needed to get across to them, because he knew he was going to be going to trial soon, and that he was going to be going to the cross, dying, resurrecting, and then ascending back to heaven. And he was preparing his disciples for this. And this all took place over one evening. Now, what we're going to see now coming up is everything that transpired after that dinner. So this whole timeline, even though we've been on in this his dinner for the last couple of months, all of this takes place over about 6 or 10 hours. So just keep that in mind, that this is all in the same time frame. One of the things that happened back in chapter 13 was Jesus was having a conversation with his disciples, and he was telling them that he was leaving and that they could not go with him. But Peter, as bold as he was, and Peter was a very bold disciple, he told Jesus, and I'm paraphrasing, that he would stick with Jesus, that he would be with him through thick and thin, and he would go wherever he went. And Jesus said, "Oh yeah, all right, that's not going to happen, because before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And he was referring to that evening. He said, before this day is done, before the sun comes up tomorrow, you're going to deny me 3 times. So I want you to listen for that as I read the chapter, or read the verses. The other thing I want you to understand is that John has made this whole entire book, his entire book was teaching us, showing us that Jesus is God. That's the whole point of his gospel, that he wants us to realize that Jesus is God. So now what we're going to be seeing is we're going to be seeing Jesus going through a number of trials. Now, the first thing you need to know about these trials is that they were illegitimate, because they all happened at night, and the Jews had that it was against their rules and their laws that trials would be held at night. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to ask Jesus what he did wrong. That again was contrary to their rules. Their rules were that somebody had to present the crime to the court, or the panel, and that the prosecuting, just like we do in this country, would have to prove that person's guilt. That person didn't have to prove their innocence. But the way they had this set up was that they wanted Jesus to admit his guilt without any kind of formal charge of crime. That again was against their rules. The other thing is that the Jews also handed this off to, we're going to hear about this Roman governor. His name was Pontius Pilate. They're going to hand it off to him, which was against their rules. Then he's going to hand it to King Herod, who was the king of Israel, and he had nothing to say about it because he couldn't. So he sends it back to Pilate, and we're going to see this over the next couple of chapters. So I want you to understand that all of these trials are completely illegitimate. They were not supposed to happen, but they did happen. And they happened because this was God's plan. Now, the other thing, the last thing I want you to realize in this is, as I said, John has been trying to show us that Jesus is God. That's what the intent of his gospel is. So what you can say here is that Jesus is God and God is on trial. And that's interesting, because God puts himself on trial, allows all this to happen just so we can see how much he loves us and how much he was willing to take our sin away, take our guilt. And that's going to come up as we read along. So let me get into the verses here, and I'll just teach you a little bit along as we go away. So we're looking at John chapter 18, verses 15 to 27. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. Now, when John says this other disciple, he's referring to himself. That's how John wrote his book. He called himself the other disciple, or he called himself the disciple that Jesus loved. But that was the way John referred to himself. So here we go. You aren't one of those men's disciples, are you? She asked Peter. Peter replied, I am not. So there's his first denial. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around the fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing there warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. And here's where I said that other translations or other gospels will say the high priest asked Jesus, what did you do wrong? And that was the other thing that I said that was against their rules. So Jesus said, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. Now Jesus was respectfully saying to the high priest, listen, I've spoken. Everybody's heard me speak. Everybody knows what I've said. Ask them what I've said. Okay? They'll tell you. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. Jesus said, if I have done something wrong, testify to what it was that I did wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now, Annas was Caiaphas's father-in-law. And since Caiaphas was the high priest, even though he was the high priest, Annas called all the shots. So basically, Caiaphas did what Annas told him to do. Another thing that was against the Jewish rules and laws. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. There's a second denial. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him, didn't I see you with him in the garden? Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment the rooster began to crow. Here's the thing about this. In each of Peter's denials, he gets progressively worse. First, he tells the servant girl, no, it wasn't me. And then he tells the second person, no, I already told you, stop bothering me. This wasn't me. And then the third time, Peter was angry. The translations tell us that Peter was cursing at him. So you can imagine, put all the curses that you want. If somebody says to you, hey, don't you know him? And you're trying to get across that you don't, whether it's true or whether you're lying, and in this case, Peter's lying, you are going to get mad and you are going to curse words. No, I did not blanking hang out with that blanking man. That's exactly how it was. And that was Peter's denial. That was his third denial, because then the rooster crowed. So Jesus was right just a few hours ago. And this is important because later on, and hopefully I can remember to bring this into the lesson, is that in other Gospels, there's an incident in there where after the resurrection, Jesus or the angels tell the disciples to go tell the disciples he's in Galilee, and tell Peter also. So there's going to be a restoration. But the point is here is that we can get so caught up in ourselves and so scared of a situation and so angry at something that we can deny Jesus in a vehemently angry way, which I know firsthand on how to do that. I don't encourage you to do it, but I know what it's like to be in Peter's shoes. I know exactly how it feels, and I know exactly what is said. So I just want you to know that I understand this, and this is why I'm able to teach this to you, because I've been there, done that. All right. So next week, what we're going to see is Jesus, we're going to see more developments in the trials that God is being put on. And I'm hoping that you understand that this is God on trial, and he's on trial for you. All right? Have yourself a great week.